It was a cold autumn night when I received an unexpected phone call from an old friend, Ricardo. His voice was strangely urgent. He told me about an old cemetery on the outskirts of the city, a place shrouded in mystery and fear. "You need to see this," he insisted, his voice trembling. Although hesitant, my curiosity was stronger. I prepared for the nighttime visit, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. As I grabbed my flashlight and a coat, I couldn't shake the growing sense of foreboding within me. Ricardo was a natural skeptic, so his insistence on visiting a cemetery at midnight was completely out of character. Something was wrong, but I was determined to find out what it was. I arrived at the cemetery at midnight. The air was heavy, wrapped in a thick fog that obscured the gravestones and twisted trees. The iron gate creaked painfully as it opened, revealing a worn stone path that snaked between ancient tombstones. The full moon cast a pale, sinister glow over the place, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move on their own. The statues of angels and saints, weathered by time, had expressions deformed by moss and erosion. They seemed to watch every ancient tombstones. The full moon cast a pale, sinister glow over the place, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move on their own. The statues of angels and saints, weathered by time, had expressions deformed by moss and erosion. They seemed to watch every move I made with empty, accusatory eyes. The smell of damp earth and decay filled the air, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. As I explored the cemetery, I was startled by an old man emerging from the shadows. He was the cemetery's caretaker, a man with deep, sad eyes that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. His face was lined with wrinkles and scars, and his presence was both reassuring and unsettling. With a hoarse voice, he began to tell stories of supernatural and inexplicable events that had occurred there. "This place is cursed," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. Many years ago, a dark ritual was performed here. And since then, the souls of the dead have not found peace. They wander the cemetery, trapped in an eternal cycle of torment. His words chilled my blood, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Continuing my walk, I saw a spectral figure in the distance. It seemed to float among the tombstones, a pale shadow standing out in the darkness. My heart raced as I approached, each step heavy and uncertain. When I got closer, the figure disappeared, leaving only an intense cold in the air, as if it had taken all life with it. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I looked around. But there was nothing but silent gravestones. The night breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it an almost inaudible sound, like a distant lament. The fog seemed to close around me, making the darkness even more impenetrable. Suddenly, I began to hear whispering voices around me. They were indistinct murmurs coming from all directions. intertwining in a cacophony of whispers. The voices spoke of ancient secrets, betrayals, and regrets, of lost souls who could not rest. Each word was a cold whisper that penetrated my mind, filling me with deep terror. I tried to ignore the voices, but they only grew louder, more insistent. It was as if the cemetery itself was alive, trying to communicate something terrible. The darkness seemed to close in around me, suffocating me. The feeling of disorientation was overwhelming, and for a moment, I thought I was losing my sanity. Walking among the tombstones, I came across an open grave. The earth was disturbed, as if something had been recently removed. My heart raced as I approached. Inside the grave, I found an old diary, its pages yellowed and fragile. I picked up the diary with trembling hands and began to read. The words in the diary revealed terrible secrets about the cemetery. They told the story of a dark cult that had performed profane rituals on that sacred ground, cursing the place forever. The descriptions were vivid and horrifying, detailing sacrifices and invocations of malevolent entities. Each page I turned deepened my fear, and the feeling that something terrible was about to happen became unbearable. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me, a sensation of ice running down my spine. I looked back, but saw nothing. The feeling of being watched was intense and inescapable. Fear took hold of me, and I began to run, my steps echoing in the cemetery's deadly silence. The faster I ran, the stronger the feeling of being chased. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing. Panic took over, and the air seemed to become denser and harder to breathe. The cemetery felt like an endless maze, and every time I tried to find the exit, I seemed even more lost. In my desperation, I found refuge in an old mausoleum. The iron door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty interior. I quickly entered and closed the door behind me, trying to catch my breath. The silence inside the mausoleum was oppressive, but I soon realized I was not alone. Restless spirits began to manifest, their spectral forms emerging from the walls and floor. They surrounded me, their empty, desperate eyes fixed on me. I felt a cold chill pass through my body, and my breath caught in my throat. The spirits' voices whispered in unison, telling stories of suffering and revenge. I tried to escape, but the mausoleum's doors were locked, and the feeling of despair was overwhelming. The spirits, despite their terrifying appearance, did not seem to want to harm me. Instead, they were trying to communicate something. Through visions and whispers, they revealed that the cemetery was the site of an ancient ritual that kept their souls trapped. A spellbook, hidden deep within the mausoleum, held the key to breaking the curse. With a mix of fear and determination, I began searching. For the book. Every step was accompanied by the spirit's watchful eyes, guiding me through the dark, labyrinthine mausoleum. Finally, I found a secret compartment, where the spellbook was hidden. The pages were old and filled with strange symbols, but the spirits helped me decipher the instructions to break the curse. With the spellbook in hand, I prepared to perform the ritual. The spirits formed a circle around me, their presences giving me strength and courage. I began to recite the ancient words, but was soon interrupted by a malevolent force emerging from the shadows. The malevolent entity responsible for the curse manifested before me. It was a grotesque and terrifying figure, its eyes glowing with malevolence. In a desperate struggle, I tried to continue the ritual, while the entity tried to stop me. The air around me seemed to vibrate with negative energy, and every word I uttered was a battle. After an exhausting struggle, I managed to complete the ritual. The malevolent entity let out a deafening scream and began to dissipate, its power broken. The trapped souls began to free themselves, their spectral forms dissolving into light. The cemetery began to transform before my eyes, losing its aura of terror and desolation. The fog began to dissipate, and the moonlight seemed brighter and more welcoming. The statues and tombstones that once seemed threatening now looked like simple stone monuments. The air was lighter, and the sense of oppression disappeared. Finally, the souls found peace, and the cemetery seemed a place of rest, not torment. When dawn finally arrived, I left the cemetery with trembling steps. The memories of the past night were etched in my mind, a mix of terror and relief. I looked back one last time, seeing the cemetery bathed in the light of the rising sun. It seemed peaceful now, but I knew I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed. As I walked back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. It was as if the eyes of the statues and the shadows of the trees were still fixed on me, a constant reminder of the forces I had faced. The experience had deeply marked me, and although the souls had been freed, I felt that the darkness of the cemetery was still with me. When I got home, I collapsed on the couch, exhausted both physically and mentally. I closed my eyes, trying to banish the visions of the lost souls and the malevolent entity. But even in the comfort of my home, the whispers seemed to follow me, echoing in the dark corners of my mind. The sense of unease, like a persistent whisper in my mind, reminded me that some secrets should never be unearthed. The following days were filled with reflection and nightmares. Every night, I relived the most terrifying moments of my visit to the cemetery. Ricardo never contacted me again, and I wondered if he too had felt the weight of what we discovered. I tried to research more about the cemetery and the curse, but the information was scarce and contradictory. It seemed the story wanted to remain buried. One particularly dark night, as I tried to fall asleep, I heard a familiar voice. "You need to see this," Ricardo whispered, the same urgency in his voice. I opened my eyes and saw a shadow in the corner of the room, Ricardo's spectral form watching me with empty eyes. Before I could react, he disappeared, leaving me with a sense of dread and a terrifying certainty. The cemetery's curse had not been completely broken. The visit to the old cemetery changed my life forever. I discovered dark secrets and faced forces I never thought were real. Although I helped free the trapped souls, a part of me knew the cemetery's darkness still followed me. The cemetery seemed to have left an indelible mark on my soul, a constant reminder that some things should remain forgotten. And so, with a mix of relief and terror, I continued my life, always keeping an eye on the shadows and an ear tuned to the whispers of the night. Because, deep down, I knew the cemetery's secrets would never be completely buried.